Welcome to the Billionaire's Choice. Before we begin today's story, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Every story here is a journey of love, destiny, and life-changing choices. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And now, let's begin. Still waiting for someone to put a ring on your finger, Tessa? The laughter came a second later, sharp enough to cut through the music, the conversations, and every fragile piece of dignity she had fought to protect. Tessa Whitmore felt every eye in the ballroom turn toward her at once. Crystal chandeliers cast warm golden light across the ceiling of the Grand Regency Hotel, reflecting off polished marble floors and rows of perfectly dressed guests. The annual Whitestone Corporate Leadership Gala was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, for Tessa, it suddenly felt like a courtroom. She stood near the center of the room in a midnight blue dress she had carefully saved for months to buy, a glass of sparkling water in her hand and a practiced smile on her face. For a brief moment, she considered pretending she had not heard him. But Derek Vaughn had never been the type of man who allowed someone to ignore him. "Come on," he called louder, grinning as several people around him chuckled. "It's been what now? 3 years since you dumped me? Don't tell me nobody's proposed yet." More laughter followed. Tessa felt heat rise into her cheeks. Not because she was embarrassed, because she was angry. Derek had always confused kindness with weakness. Even after all these years, he still believed he could walk into a room and make her feel small. Around him stood a circle of executives, investors, and socialites. The kind of people who loved a little public drama as long as it belonged to someone else. Derek looked exactly as she remembered. Perfect hair, expensive tuxedo. The confident smile of a man who believed success had proven he was right about everything. Beside him stood his fiancée, a beautiful blonde woman whose diamond engagement ring seemed large enough to have its own zip code. Derek casually wrapped an arm around her waist and flashed the ring toward the crowd. "I'm just saying," he continued. "Maybe you've been setting the bar too high." More laughter. Tessa slowly set her glass on a nearby table. She could have answered. She could have reminded everyone that Derek had cheated on her during the final year of their relationship. She could have told them how he had left when her family was struggling, deciding her problems were inconvenient. She could have exposed a dozen truths. Instead, she simply smiled. "Congratulations on your engagement, Derek," she said calmly. "You seem very happy." The response disappointed him. She could see it immediately. Men like Derek thrived on reactions. They needed visible victories. Her composure robbed him of one. But he wasn't finished. "That's it?" he asked. No speech, no tears, no jealousy. The crowd waited. Tessa folded her hands together. "Why would I be jealous?" For the first time, his smile tightened. Around them, the live jazz band continued playing softly, trying to smooth over the tension. Waiters moved through the room, carrying silver trays of appetizers. Conversations resumed in cautious whispers. Yet Derek pressed forward. "Because," he said, raising his champagne glass, "everyone deserves a happy ending. Some people just take a little longer to find one." A few guests laughed again. Tessa glanced toward the ballroom windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Beyond the glass, thousands of city lights stretched into the distance. Somewhere out there, beyond the noise and judgment and appearances, existed a life nobody in this room knew about. A secret so enormous that if she spoke a single sentence, every expression around her would change instantly. Her fingers instinctively rose toward the delicate silver chain hidden beneath her dress. The chain rested against her heart, and attached to it was something nobody here had ever seen. Nobody except one man. She quickly lowered her hand before anyone noticed. The agreement had been clear. No public displays. No announcements. No questions. At least not yet. Derek followed her movement, but missed its meaning entirely. "Well," he said with a smirk, lifting his glass higher, "here's hoping somebody finally puts a ring on that finger." This time the laughter echoed louder than before. Tessa looked around the ballroom. She saw amusement, curiosity, pity, but not one person knew the truth. Not one person knew that for the last 6 months she had already been married. Not one person knew that the most powerful man connected to this event was legally her husband. And not one person noticed the moment the ballroom doors quietly opened at the far end of the room. Tessa did, because the instant she saw him step inside, her heartbeat changed. 6 months earlier, Tessa Whitmore sat alone in a quiet hospital waiting room, staring at a stack of medical bills she could barely bring herself to open. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. The coffee in her paper cup had gone cold nearly an hour ago. Through the glass doors across the hall, she could see her father sleeping in a recovery room, his chest rising and falling steadily after another difficult procedure. The doctors were optimistic, but optimism did not pay invoices. Optimism did not stop collection notices from arriving in the mailbox every week. Optimism did not prevent the bank from warning her that the mortgage payments were falling behind. Tessa closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. For months, she had worked overtime, taken extra event contracts, and sold nearly everything she could live without. Yet every time she managed to move one step forward, another expense appeared. Her phone buzzed on the plastic chair beside her. She expected another reminder about a payment deadline. Instead, the screen displayed an unfamiliar number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello, Miss Whitmore," a calm voice asked. "My name is Jonathan Pierce. I represent Mr. Asher Calloway." Tessa frowned. Everyone in Chicago knew the name. Asher Calloway was the founder of Calloway Global, a company so large its headquarters occupied an entire city block downtown. "I think you have the wrong number," she replied. "I assure you I do not. Mr. Calloway would like to meet with you." 24 hours later, Tessa found herself stepping into the top floor of Calloway Global. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan. The office felt less like a workplace and more like the command center of a private kingdom. She expected assistants and lawyers. She expected delays and security checks. What she did not expect was Asher Calloway himself, standing by the window waiting for her. He turned as she entered. Tall, composed, impeccably dressed. The kind of man who looked completely comfortable carrying the weight of billion-dollar decisions. Yet something in his expression surprised her. He looked tired. Not physically tired. Lonely tired. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Please sit." Tessa remained standing. "I would rather know why I am here." To her surprise, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "Fair enough." He motioned toward a chair anyway. This time she sat. A leather folder rested on the table between them. Asher glanced at it before looking directly into her eyes. "I am going to make a proposal," he said. "And before you answer, I would like you to hear the entire offer." Tessa immediately disliked where the conversation seemed to be heading. What kind of offer? For several seconds, silence filled the room. Outside the windows, clouds drifted across the Chicago skyline. Finally, Asher spoke. "My grandfather established a family trust decades ago. One condition remains active." His voice stayed calm, controlled. "I must be legally married before my 38th birthday to retain controlling ownership of the company." Tessa blinked. "And what does that have to do with me?" Asher opened the folder. Inside were documents already prepared by attorneys. "I need a wife." The words landed so abruptly that she nearly laughed. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious. There are millions of women in America." "Yes." "And somehow you ended up here." "Yes." Tessa stared at him, searching for signs of a joke. There were none. "Why me?" she asked quietly. Asher looked at her longer than before. "Because every report I requested told me the same thing. You are intelligent, responsible, honest. You honor commitments even when they cost you." Tessa had coordinated several charity projects for Calloway Global over the years, and I had quietly noticed your professionalism long before this meeting. He paused. "And because I believe you need help as much as I need a solution." Tessa felt her pulse quicken. Across the table sat one of the wealthiest men in the country. Yet the proposal in front of her sounded less like a business negotiation and more like the beginning of a life-changing mistake. Then Asher slowly slid the folder toward her, and everything became even more complicated. Tessa stared at the folder for what felt like an eternity. The pages inside outlined a future she never could have imagined. Legal agreements, financial provisions, confidentiality clauses. Every line had been prepared with astonishing precision. Yet beneath all the formal language was one simple reality. Asher Calloway was asking her to become his wife. Not because he loved her, not because he even truly knew her, but because both of them were standing at the edge of problems they could not solve alone. She slowly closed the folder and looked up. "If I say yes, what exactly happens?" Asher folded his hands on the table. "A private civil ceremony. No publicity, no media, no announcement." His voice remained calm and measured. "The marriage remains confidential for 12 months. After that, if both parties agree, the arrangement ends. Tessa felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment she could not explain. And during those 12 months? There will be rules. The answer came immediately. Of course there would be rules. Men like Asher built their lives on rules. He opened another document and slid it toward her. Rule 1. Our marriage remains private unless disclosure becomes legally necessary. Tessa nodded. That part made sense. Rule 2. Neither of us interferes with the other's personal decisions outside agreed obligations. She continued reading. Rule 3. No public displays that create unnecessary attention. Including wedding rings, Asher added. Especially wedding rings. Her eyes moved lower. Corporate appearances, charity events, limited social obligations, professional conduct at all times. The entire arrangement looked less like a marriage and more like a carefully managed partnership between two companies. And Rule 4, she asked. Asher hesitated for the first time, only briefly, but she noticed it. No emotional expectations. The room became quiet. Outside the windows, sunlight reflected off the lake in bright silver waves. Tessa looked at the sentence again. No emotional expectations. Somehow that line felt more important than all the others. You really thought this through. I had to. Have you always planned your life this carefully? A faint smile touched his face. Only the parts one cannot control. For a moment neither spoke. Then Tessa lowered her gaze to the medical bills she had brought in her bag. She thought about her father, the mortgage, the endless fear of running out of time. She hated feeling trapped. She hated needing help. But most of all, she hated knowing Pride would not pay hospital expenses. If I agree, she asked quietly, my father's treatment is covered? Yes. The mortgage? Paid in full. No hidden conditions? None. Tessa studied him carefully. Billionaires were supposed to be intimidating, ruthless, impossible to read. Yet Asher seemed less interested in winning than in finding a solution. That did not make him harmless. It simply made him harder to understand. Several days later, Tessa stood in a small private courthouse wearing a simple ivory dress she already owned. No guests filled the seats. No music played. No photographers waited outside. Only a judge, 2 attorneys, and the man standing beside her. The ceremony lasted less than 15 minutes. She barely remembered most of it afterward. She remembered signing documents. She remembered hearing her own voice answer questions. Most of all, she remembered the strange realization that her entire life had changed before lunch. Afterward, the attorneys left first. The judge offered congratulations and disappeared down the hallway. Suddenly, only Tessa and Asher remained. For the first time, the silence felt awkward. Asher reached into his pocket and removed a small velvet box. He opened it. Inside rested a simple platinum wedding band. Elegant, understated, timeless. Tessa stared at it. I thought we were not supposed to wear rings. We are not. Then why give it to me? He looked directly at her. Because, regardless of the arrangement, you still deserve one. Something about the answer caught her off guard. She accepted the ring carefully. Moments later, she slipped it onto a thin silver chain and fastened it around her neck. Hidden beneath her blouse, it rested close to her heart, invisible to everyone else. Asher watched quietly. That works. Good, she said, because I am not leaving it in a drawer. For the first time since they met, a genuine smile appeared on his face. It transformed him completely. Less distant, less untouchable, more human. Neither of them realized it then. The contract they feared would keep emotions away had already failed before the first week was over. Tessa expected the arrangement to feel temporary, clinical, a transaction with a finish line already marked on the calendar. Instead, the weeks began slipping past in ways neither she nor Asher anticipated. Their lives rarely intersected in the beginning. He spent long hours leading one of the largest companies in the country. She continued managing corporate events, client launches, and charity functions across Chicago. Most days consisted of brief text messages, scheduling updates, travel confirmations, occasional reminders about appearances they were required to attend together. Nothing more. At least that was how it started. Then came the business dinner in Boston. A snowstorm grounded flights across the East Coast, forcing executives and guests to remain overnight. The hotel restaurant stayed open late to accommodate stranded travelers. Tessa found herself sitting across from Asher at nearly 10 o'clock, sharing a simple meal while heavy snow drifted outside the windows. For the first time, there were no lawyers, no contracts, no expectations, just two exhausted people waiting for the weather to improve. "You always work this much?" she asked. Asher looked up from his coffee. "Probably more than I should." "That sounds miserable." A faint smile appeared. "Most people call it ambition. Most people are wrong." To her surprise, he laughed. Not the polite smile she had seen before. A real laugh. Quiet but genuine. The sound lingered longer than she expected. After that evening, conversations became easier. During long drives between events, they spoke about books, movies, childhood memories. Tessa learned that Asher preferred old baseball stadiums to luxury vacations. He learned she collected secondhand novels from independent bookstores. She discovered he secretly donated millions to scholarship programs without putting his name on them. He discovered she spent every Sunday afternoon visiting her father, even when work left her exhausted. Little by little, the distance between them began to shrink. One rainy Saturday, Tessa arrived at the hospital carrying flowers for her father and nearly stopped in surprise. Asher was already there, sitting beside the bed, talking with her father as though they had known each other for years. Her father smiled the moment he saw her. "You never told me your husband knows more about baseball than I do." Tessa stared. "You came here." Asher looked almost embarrassed. "I was nearby." Her father laughed. That is Billionaire language for he drove 40 minutes across the city. Asher shook his head, but did not deny it. Something warm settled in Tessa's chest. Later that evening, while walking through the parking garage together, she found herself smiling for no reason at all. Months passed. Their routine evolved naturally. Some nights they met for dinner after work. Other nights they exchanged messages long after midnight about things that had nothing to do with the contract. The strange part was how comfortable it felt. Neither acknowledged the change. Neither discussed it. Yet both noticed it. One evening, after a charity fundraiser downtown, they stood on the rooftop terrace overlooking the city. Wind moved gently across the skyline. Thousands of lights sparkled below. Tessa leaned against the railing. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if none of this happened?" Asher looked at her. "The marriage?" "Yes." He considered the question carefully. "Before you, every day looked exactly the same." His voice was quiet, honest. Meetings, reports, decisions, then repeat. "And now?" For a moment, he simply watched her. "Now I actually look forward to parts of my week." Tessa felt her heartbeat quicken unexpectedly. She turned away before he could notice. Neither spoke for several seconds. The city hummed below them. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed through the night. She reached beneath her blouse and lightly touched the chain around her neck. The hidden ring rested where it always had, close to her heart. Lately, she had started forgetting it was part of a contract. And judging by the expression in Asher's eyes whenever he looked at her, she was beginning to suspect he was forgetting too. The illusion of peace lasted longer than either of them expected. By the 7th month of their arrangement, Tessa had stopped counting the days until the contract expired. That realization should have worried her. Instead, it followed her quietly through ordinary moments. A text message wishing her luck before an important presentation. A cup of coffee waiting on her desk exactly the way she liked it. A late-night phone call that started as business and somehow turned into a 40-minute conversation about childhood dreams. None of it felt dramatic. That was the problem. It felt natural. Then Derek Vaughn walked back into her life. The first sign came during a downtown networking luncheon hosted by one of Chicago's largest real estate groups. Tessa was reviewing event schedules when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Tessa Whitmore. I almost did not recognize you." She froze for half a second before turning around. Derek stood there wearing an expensive tailored suit and the same confident smile that had once fooled her into believing he was a different man. "Derek, you look good." "Thank you." "Still working too hard?" Tessa offered a polite smile. "Some things do not change." He laughed as though they were old friends catching up. They were not. "You should come to the engagement party next month," he said. "Everybody from the old crowd will be there." Tessa had no interest in reliving the past. "I will check my schedule." Still impossible to pin down. His grin widened. "That is probably why you are still single." The comment landed exactly where he intended it to. Derek always enjoyed testing boundaries, measuring reactions, looking for weaknesses. Tessa simply gathered her notes. "Enjoy the party, Derek." She walked away before giving him the satisfaction of a response. Unfortunately, that was only the beginning. Over the following weeks, Derek seemed to appear everywhere. Industry mixers, charity functions, corporate celebrations. Each encounter came with another casual remark disguised as humor. Another reminder that he believed he had won some imaginary competition years ago. One evening, after a fundraising event, Tessa found herself sitting across from Asher in the back corner of a quiet Italian restaurant. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The city glowed beyond the glass. She stirred her pasta without much appetite. "Something happened," Asher said. It was not a question. Tessa looked up. "Why do you think that?" "Because you have been moving ravioli around your plate for 10 minutes. Despite herself, she smiled. Derek has been making appearances. The warmth in Asher's expression faded slightly. "Your ex." "Unfortunately." She explained the recent encounters. The comments. The jokes. The constant need Derek seemed to have for proving something. Asher listened without interrupting. When she finished, he set down his fork. "Does he bother you?" Tessa considered the question carefully. "Not the way he used to." "Good." His answer came immediately. Because anyone who makes another person feel small in order to feel important is already losing. She blinked. "You have thought about that before." "More than once." The conversation moved on, but something lingered afterward. Not the discussion about Derek. The way Asher had looked at her while she spoke. Protective without being controlling. Concerned without asking for anything in return. A few days later, Tessa arrived at Callaway Global for a planning meeting. As she crossed the lobby, she noticed employees greeting Asher with admiration and respect. Some looked intimidated. Others looked inspired. Yet none of them truly knew him. None of them knew the man who visited hospitals without cameras. The man who remembered birthdays. The man who called her father every few weeks simply to check on his recovery. Standing there, Tessa realized something dangerous. Derek no longer represented a chapter she missed. He represented a chapter she had outgrown. And the more she compared the two men, the more impossible the comparison became. Later that night, alone in her apartment, she removed the silver chain from around her neck and stared at the ring resting in her palm. The platinum band caught the soft light from the lamp beside her couch. 6 months ago, it had symbolized survival. A contract. An arrangement. A solution. Now it meant something she was afraid to name. Her phone buzzed. A message from Asher appeared on the screen. "Hope your meeting went well today. Get some sleep. Big presentation tomorrow." Tessa smiled before she could stop herself. Then she looked down at the ring again. For the first time, the approaching end of their agreement did not feel like freedom. It felt like a countdown. The annual Whitestone Corporate Leadership Gala had always been one of the most anticipated events of the year. Executives flew in from across the country. Investors filled the guest list. Business reporters crowded the entrance hoping to catch a glimpse of industry leaders. By 7 o'clock, the Grand Regency Ballroom shimmered beneath enormous crystal chandeliers. Tessa moved through the room with practiced professionalism, greeting sponsors, checking schedules, and making sure every detail ran smoothly. On the surface, she looked calm. Inside, she felt unsettled. Asher had been delayed by a board meeting in New York. His text earlier that afternoon had been brief. "Running behind. Save me a seat." The simple message had made her smile at the time. Now she glanced toward the entrance more often than she cared to admit. Halfway through the evening, she heard a familiar voice. There she is. Tessa closed her eyes for half a second before turning around. Derek. Of course. He stood beside his fiancée and several guests from their former social circle. A champagne glass rested comfortably in his hand. The confidence in his smile suggested he had already decided how this conversation would end. "Tessa," he said warmly, as though they were close friends. "I was hoping you made it tonight." "Good evening, Derek." "Still working harder than everyone else, I see." "Somebody has to." A few people chuckled. Derek stepped closer. "You know, I was just telling everyone about our old days." Tessa immediately knew that was not a good sign. "Were you?" "Absolutely. Back when we all thought we would have life figured out by 30. More laughter followed. The group seemed entertained. Derek looked especially pleased with himself. "And look at us now," he continued. "I am getting married next month." He lifted his fiancée's hand, displaying the massive diamond ring once again. Several guests admired it. Life moves fast. Tessa maintained her composure. "Congratulations." "Thank you." He took a sip of champagne before tilting his head slightly, although some people seemed to be moving a little slower. The nearby conversations began fading as more guests noticed the exchange. Tessa recognized the shift immediately. Derek was building an audience. He always loved an audience. Derek, his fiancée, said softly. What? He replied with a grin. We are all friends here. He turned back toward Tessa. Tell me something. Have you ever thought maybe your standards are impossible? Tessa crossed her arms calmly. Not really. Interesting. His smile widened. Because every time I see you, you are alone. The room grew quieter. Even the musicians seemed distant now. Derek sensed the attention and leaned into it. You know what amazes me? He asked. You always acted like you were waiting for something extraordinary. He glanced toward her left hand. And yet, he deliberately paused. Then he laughed. Still no ring. A ripple of laughter spread through parts of the crowd. Not everyone joined. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked curious. Tessa felt every eye in the ballroom settle on her. Months ago, the moment might have hurt. Tonight it only revealed how little Derek had changed. He still measured success by appearances. He still believed public humiliation was a form of entertainment. Maybe, Derek continued loudly. The problem is that nobody wants the job. More laughter. This time louder. His fiancée looked increasingly embarrassed, but Derek seemed energized by the attention. Tessa could feel the silver chain resting beneath her dress. Hidden. Protected. The ring remained exactly where it had been for 6 months. For one brief moment, she considered ending the entire conversation with a single sentence. One truth. One revelation. Instead, she remained silent. Derek interpreted her silence as weakness. Come on, he said. I am only joking. Then he raised his glass toward the crowd. Here is to finding someone before retirement age. The ballroom erupted again. Tessa stood perfectly still. She was aware of the whispers, the smiles, the judgment. Yet something else captured her attention. At the far end of the ballroom, the large doors slowly opened. Several heads turned. The room's energy shifted almost instantly. Tessa followed their gaze. And the moment she saw Asher Calloway step inside, dressed in a black tuxedo and wearing an expression she had never seen before, she realized Derek had just made the biggest mistake of his life. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The ballroom seemed suspended in time as Asher crossed the marble floor with calm, deliberate steps. Conversations faded. Laughter disappeared. Even Derek's confident smile began to weaken. Everyone in the room knew who Asher Calloway was. His company employed thousands of people. His investments shaped entire industries. When he entered a room, attention naturally followed. Yet tonight, he seemed completely uninterested in anyone except Tessa. She felt her pulse quicken as he approached. Months of memories flashed through her mind. The hospital visits, the late-night conversations, the rooftop talks, the quiet moments that had transformed a contract into something neither of them had expected. Asher stopped directly beside her. His gaze moved briefly toward Derek before returning to her. I am sorry I am late, he said softly. The simple sentence felt strangely intimate amid the silence surrounding them. Tessa managed a small smile. You made it. I said I would. Derek cleared his throat. Mr. Calloway. Asher finally turned toward him. Derek. The difference was impossible to miss. Derek knew Asher's name. Asher barely seemed interested in remembering Derek's. Several guests exchanged nervous glances. Derek attempted to recover his confidence. We were just having a little fun. I noticed. Asher's voice remained calm. That somehow made it more powerful. Derek laughed awkwardly. Nothing serious. No. The single word carried enough weight to make the room uncomfortable. Tessa noticed Derek's fiancée quietly step back. Even she seemed to realize the situation was no longer under his control. Asher looked at Tessa again. His expression softened immediately. Are you all right? She nodded. I am fine. The answer relieved him, but only slightly. His eyes dropped briefly toward the neckline of her dress, toward the silver chain hidden beneath the fabric. Something changed in his expression. A decision. A realization. Perhaps both. He suddenly realized protecting the secret mattered less than protecting her. Tessa felt her breath catch. They had spent 6 months protecting the secret. 6 months following the rules. 6 months pretending that what existed between them was temporary. Yet standing there beneath the chandeliers, surrounded by people who measured worth through appearances, the rules suddenly felt very far away. Derek attempted one final joke. "Well," he said, forcing a smile, "at least somebody came to rescue the evening." A few nervous laughs escaped from the crowd. Asher ignored them completely. Instead, he raised a hand toward Tessa. Slowly, carefully, giving her every opportunity to stop him. She did not. His fingers gently touched the silver chain around her neck. The room watched in confusion. Tessa's heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear anything else. For a brief moment, neither of them moved. Then Asher carefully drew the chain forward. The platinum ring slipped into view beneath the ballroom lights. Gasps erupted instantly across the room. The reaction spread like a wave. Confusion, shock, disbelief. Tessa heard whispers from every direction. Derek stared at the ring as though his mind refused to process what he was seeing. Asher held the chain gently between his fingers. "You asked why she was not wearing a ring," he said. Nobody interrupted. Nobody dared. He released the chain and reached into his jacket pocket. A second platinum band appeared in his hand. The matching ring. The one he had carried for months. The one he had never shown publicly. The room fell completely silent. Slowly, he slid the ring onto his own finger. Then he looked directly at Derek. The reason is simple. Derek's face had gone pale. "She has been my wife for 6 months." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The words seemed to echo through the ballroom long after he finished speaking. Tessa felt tears threaten to form, not from embarrassment, but from overwhelming relief. The secret that had lived between them for so long no longer needed protection. Around them, stunned guests exchanged looks of disbelief. Phones lowered. Conversations vanished. Every assumption made about Tessa during the evening had collapsed in a single moment. Derek opened his mouth, closed it again, then tried once more. "You are married?" It was all he could manage. Asher's arm settled gently around Tessa's shoulders. Natural, certain, unquestionable. Very much so. And for the first time all evening, Tessa allowed herself to smile. The ballroom remained frozen for several seconds after Asher's announcement. Then the whispers began. Quiet at first, then everywhere at once. Tessa could almost feel the shock moving through the crowd. Executives exchanged stunned looks. Investors leaned toward one another. Reporters suddenly found their phones very interesting. The entire evening had changed direction in less than a minute. Derek stood motionless. The confidence that had carried him through the night seemed to disappear piece by piece. For the first time since she had known him, he looked completely unprepared. 6 months, he finally managed. "You have been married for 6 months?" Tessa noticed how different his voice sounded now. Less certain, less arrogant. Asher did not answer immediately. He simply looked at him with calm indifference. "That is what I said." A few people nearby struggled to hide their reactions. Derek glanced around the room, perhaps searching for someone to support him. Nobody did. Moments earlier, many had laughed with him. Now nobody seemed eager to stand beside him. His fiancée looked embarrassed enough to disappear into the crowd. "Why would you keep something like that secret?" Derek asked. This time Tessa answered. "Because it was our decision." The words surprised even her. Not because they were difficult to say, because of how natural they felt. Our decision. The phrase carried a weight she could not ignore. Derek shook his head slowly. "I do not understand." "You do not need to," Asher replied. The conversation ended right there. Cleanly. Completely. Derek realized it too. Without another word, he stepped back. The audience that had fueled his confidence only minutes earlier now felt like a spotlight exposing every mistake he had made. One by one, people drifted away from him. The energy of the room followed someone else now. Eventually, the music resumed. Conversations cautiously returned. Yet nothing felt quite the same. For the rest of the evening, guests approached Tessa with congratulations and questions. Many seemed genuinely happy for her. Others simply looked stunned. Through it all, Asher remained nearby. Not possessive, not controlling, simply present. Steady. For the first time in months, neither of them had to hide. Nearly an hour later, they finally escaped onto a quiet terrace overlooking the Chicago skyline. Cool night air greeted them the moment the doors closed behind them. The city stretched endlessly below, glowing with millions of lights. Neither spoke at first. After everything that had happened, the silence felt strangely comfortable. Tessa stepped toward the railing. "Well," she said softly. "That was unexpected." A faint smile appeared on Asher's face. "A little." She turned toward him. "You broke every rule in the contract tonight." "I am aware." The lawyers are probably having nightmares already. He laughed quietly. The sound warmed something deep inside her. Then the smile faded. Not from discomfort. From honesty. The kind neither of them could avoid any longer. Tessa, he said. Her heart immediately accelerated. There was something different in his voice. Something serious. When Derek was talking tonight, I realized something. She waited. I realized I was no longer protecting a contract. The city noise seemed to disappear around them. What do you mean? Asher took a slow breath. The contract stopped meaning anything months ago. Tessa stared at him. Every conversation, every memory, every moment from the past 6 months seemed to rush through her mind all at once. Asher. I kept telling myself there would be a right time to say it. He looked directly into her eyes. Then I kept finding reasons to wait. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Say what? For a brief second, the billionaire who could command boardrooms and billion-dollar negotiations looked unexpectedly vulnerable. That somewhere along the way, he said quietly, you became the best part of my life. Tessa felt tears gathering despite her efforts to stop them. Not from sadness, from relief. Because she had spent weeks wondering whether she was the only one who felt this way. She was not. And standing beneath the Chicago skyline, with the contract nearly finished and every secret finally exposed, both of them understood the same truth. The arrangement that had begun as a solution had become something neither of them wanted to lose. 1 year later, sunlight poured through the tall oak trees surrounding a quiet lakeside estate just outside Chicago. The air smelled of fresh flowers and summer grass. Gentle waves rolled across the water, reflecting the afternoon sky like polished glass. It was nothing like the courthouse where Tessa and Asher had first exchanged vows. There were no attorneys carrying folders, no contracts waiting to be signed, no deadlines, no conditions, only family, friends, and the people who mattered most. Tessa stood beneath a white floral arch overlooking the lake, holding a small bouquet of ivory roses. A soft breeze moved through her hair. Across the aisle, guests smiled as they watched her. Her father sat proudly in the front row, healthier and stronger than he had been a year earlier. Seeing him there brought tears to her eyes. Not long ago, she had feared losing everything. Now she could barely recognize the woman she had been. A familiar voice beside her interrupted her thoughts. You are smiling. Tessa turned. Her father offered a grin. That usually means something good. She laughed softly. I think it does. Music drifted through the air. Guests slowly rose from their seats. Tessa looked toward the end of the aisle and saw Asher waiting beneath the arch. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The conversations, the music, the lake. All she could see was him. Not the billionaire whose name appeared on magazine covers. Not the executive who commanded boardrooms. Simply the man who had sat beside her father in a hospital room. The man who remembered how she took her coffee. The man who had become home without either of them realizing it. Asher smiled the moment their eyes met. The same smile that had first appeared outside a courthouse nearly a year earlier. Tessa began walking toward him. Each step felt lighter than the last. When she finally reached the front, Asher quietly took her hands in his. Neither wanted to let go. The officiant spoke warmly about unexpected beginnings. About trust. About choosing someone every day. Tessa barely heard most of it. Her attention remained fixed on the man standing in front of her. Eventually came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The officiant smiled. You may now exchange your vows. Asher spoke first. His voice was steady but filled with emotion. A year ago, I asked you to marry me because I needed a solution. What I received instead was the greatest gift of my life. Tessa felt tears forming immediately. Around them, several guests reached for tissues. You taught me that success means very little if there is nobody to share it with. You reminded me that kindness is not weakness. And every day since meeting you, I have become a better man than I was before. His grip tightened gently around her hands. If I had the chance to start over, I would choose you again. Every single time. Tessa blinked through tears and laughed softly. Now you are making it impossible for me to follow that. Laughter spread through the crowd. She looked at him for a moment before speaking. When I first met you, I thought I was accepting a temporary arrangement. I never imagined I would find my best friend. Her voice trembled slightly. You stood beside me when life felt impossible. You protected me without trying to control me. You believed in me even when I doubted myself. She smiled through her tears. And somewhere along the way, You became the person I never want to live without. The lake shimmered behind them. The wind gently moved the flowers surrounding the ceremony. Everything felt perfect. The officiant nodded toward Asher. He reached into his pocket and removed a familiar platinum ring. Not a new one. The same ring that had traveled with them through an entire year of uncertainty. Tessa recognized it immediately, the symbol of where their story began. Slowly, she removed the silver chain she still wore around her neck. The hidden ring rested against her palm. For months, it had represented a secret. Today, it represented a promise. Together, they exchanged the rings once more. This time, there was nothing to hide. The officiant smiled broadly. By the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Applause erupted around the lake. Cheers followed. Asher pulled Tessa into a warm embrace as the guests celebrated. Later that evening, long after the ceremony ended and the sun began sinking beneath the horizon, they stood together on a dock overlooking the water. Tessa rested her head against his shoulder. You know, she said quietly, this might be the first time our marriage actually feels official. Asher laughed softly. Only because there are no lawyers around. She smiled. Then she looked down at the ring shining openly on her finger. No longer hidden. No longer protected by secrecy. Exactly where it belonged. And as the last light of day reflected across the lake, both of them understood the same simple truth. Their marriage had started as an agreement. But the love had always been real. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share this video, and let us know where you are watching from. And subscribe to the Billionaire's Choice. Every week, we bring you heartwarming stories of love, destiny, and life-changing decisions. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new story.